we go. Yay, we're live. Hi. Hello. Hope everyone's having a good day. Like my fellowship. The Yay books gave me a good little chuckle, Sean. It did. It gave me a great chuckle. I hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to... Is this our 4th or 5th book club? I'm not sure. Regardless, welcome. We're closing out book 1 of Fellowship of the Ring today. Isn't that wild? Sound is good, video is good, let's go. Thank you for, I am a words of affirmation girly, so I do appreciate getting feedback that everything looks and sounds good. Michael, hello. Ark, hello. It's book club day. We're finishing book 1 of Fellowship of the Ring today, so it's a big freaking day. Yes, as Wild just said, let's do this. These streams are so nice. Love to see someone new discovering the magic. Thank you for saying that. I have been loving these books. I was going over some of the reading today to prepare for this, and I just, you know, it's such a nice meeting of my own interest in life, and like it's such a nice world to go into, even though today's reading gets incredibly tense. Toodles, welcome. You made it live. Today's reading gets very tense, and Mojito has joined us as well. So I want to start with a caveat to keep your eyes on the community section, because this Thursday is my last day of my current job. So I'm making a decision on if we stick with Mondays for book club or if we want to do a weekend time. So there will be a poll coming up probably on Wednesday for that. So keep your eye in the community section so we can, I can get insight from y'all on if Mondays are the best day or if we'd rather do a weekend day. I know that Sundays there's football now, so maybe Mondays are just our day. Maybe Monday evenings are just our day and our time, and that's fine with me. But we'll see. We'll do what the people want. So I actually want to start because Wild, per usual, has put a phenomenal recap and thoughts in the community section, and I kind of just want to start there because it's so incredibly good. So I think we'll start reading it, and as there's like things to talk about as I'm reading it, we'll pause and dive a little bit deeper into it. So I do know, based on this, hold on, why am I rushing? I feel like I'm running a marathon. I'm just going to take a sip of my red beverage. That's nothing important. YouTube, it's nothing. The laws of YouTube are shining down on me today. Okay. Okay, so let's start here. So I know that this goes, Wild started with their favorite part, which is a little bit further into the section. So to rewind for a second, we read chapters 10, 11, and 12. Chapter 10 was Strider. Chapter 11 was A Knife in the Dark. And chapter 12 was Flight to the Ford. So we start with leaving Bree and we end, not in Rivendell, but close to the edge of Rivendell, essentially. We're like right there, I think. Or like maybe Frodo's in it. So for overall context, that's the section of what we read today. Okay, so let me just read this because, God, I just adore Wild. They make it to Weathertop. They climb the great watchtower and are too visible. Strider realizes his mistake, and they retreat to the most sheltered corner of the dell to wait out the night. We read that the cold increased as darkness came on. They see the light fading and the land all around them too quickly falling to shadow. They huddle together instinctively, and Strider begins to tell them to tell them tales to keep their minds from fear. Merry asks to hear more of Gil-galad, and Frodo begins to indulge him, but Strider cuts him off, saying, "I do not think that tale should be told now with the servants of the enemy at hand." Sam begs to hear more of elves, since the dark seems to press round so close. Strider thinks for a moment and then tells them the tale of Tinuville, which, okay, I hope that you're in a similar position. We sometimes just, I'm reading Ark's comment about hoping the job thing works out well. Thank you, first of all. And second of all, we only have one life, right? I don't know. Sometimes you got to take leaps and you got to be a little, what some might call, reckless, and to have an abundance of happiness. The entrance to the valley. Yes. Okay. So first of all, we have I want to circle within this first part of what Wild has left us. Gil-galad. There's such a fun part when we first hear of Gil-galad, and apologies if I'm butchering that name, but we hear a hymn, and the hymn comes from somewhat of an unlikely source, in my opinion. I wasn't expecting it to be Sam, but we are at one point we're talking about we're learning that Strider knows a lot of old lore, and he brings up Gil-galad, and then Sam out of nowhere sings, "Gil-galad was an elven king. Of him the harpers sadly sang, the last whose realm was fair and free between the mountains and the sea. His sword was long, his lance was keen, his shining helm after was seen. The countless stars of heaven's field were mirrored in his silver shield. But long ago he rode away, and where he dwelleth none can say. For into darkness fell his star, and Mordor where the shadows are." And Sam goes on to say that Bilbo wrote this. Strider corrects him and says, actually, Bilbo didn't write that, but he did translate it into the book. And he had told it to Sam, which is an interesting insight into Sam and Bilbo's relationship, which I don't really think we've had before. The others turned in amazement, for the voice was Sam's. Yes, I highlighted that because I also was amazed. Sam in the book is not a character that I love. I want to be transparent about that. I have a liking for Sam. Hi, Michael. I have a liking for Sam because I know Sam from the movies, right? But Sam in the book is kind of annoying and overbearing. And it's his job, right? Like, he's there for work. It's his job to be that way to some extent, but it gets a little much sometimes, and it's not as endearing. It doesn't come across as endearing in the book as it does in the movies. And so to see this little glimpse of Sam's personality shine through a little more in this section, and he becomes more than just an employee. I am a hobbit. Hello. Hi, Hobbit. Welcome in. This is a safe space for hobbits. That's something that I loved seeing. Was we got like 2, maybe 3 glimpses of it. I mean, obviously, in a lot of the portion of what we read today with Frodo getting hurt, Sam becomes really on guard and like is Frodo's voice when Frodo can't speak. But also, like, to some extent, over questions authority that could get them more into harm's way. Like, if Strider didn't have the personality he has to talk Sam down or convince Sam that he's safe, then the consequences of Sam's overbearing nature could be really deadly for the crew. So I think that's really interesting. BBC Radio Bill Knightley, Sam sings this song. You hear his voice when you read the Gil-galad poem. Ugh, it's a good poem, but I'll tell you what story really freaking got me is the tale of Tinuville. This is so freaking good. It's the hymn, and then it's also the explanation of it too, because we'll read it and then we'll talk about the explanation. Or let me see. Strider tells us the important parts. It's the beginning of the purest love. It's the beginning of the purest love story in Middle Earth. Hi, Martin. I am safe from Gandalf from stealing. Gandalf? Gandalf doesn't want your ring. I promise. Sam has already saved Frodo's life once. Yes. I should say, I'm not trying to downplay Sam's love for Frodo at all. I definitely know and recognize and see and want it to be clear, because I really don't want to be ripped apart in the comments later, that Sam cares so deeply for Frodo. I think in the way that it's written at times in the book, it feels very like overbearing and like, come on, just like open, like it's not all, it's gonna be okay, like trust Strider, trust this, but he's not necessarily trusting in nature, and part of that is his job. So I definitely don't want to be, I'm not bashing Sam at all. at all. At 4'10", I'm almost short enough to be a hobbit. Let's go. Tolkien considered himself barren, and his wife Luthien, really? That makes it even more beautiful. Oh, the meeting of Beren and Luthien Tinuville. Their love is deep and their lives are entwined with many of the great deeds of old before death takes them, or does it? Strider says that the end of the tale is not known. That's true. And we can read it, right? We've got time. I don't know. I'm feeling really like, I know, probably the biggest character arc is the arc within myself, from going from hating the hymns to wanting to read all the hymns with you all. Should I control myself? They're buried under headstones with those names. Shut up. Oh my god. Wow. Okay, wait. Yeah. Okay, so Strider doesn't want to talk about Gil-galad, so instead he tells us this love story. Okay, I'll read it. The leaves were long, the grass was green, the hemlock umbels tall and fair, and in the glade a light was seen, of stars and shadows shimmering. Tinuville was dancing there, to music of a pipe unseen, and light of stars was in her hair, and in her raiment glimmering. There Beren came from mountains cold, and lost he wandered under leaves. And where the elven river rolled, he walked alone and sorrowing. He peered between the hemlock leaves, and saw in wonder flowers of gold upon her mantle and her sleeves, and her hair like shadow following. Enchantment healed his weary feet, that over hills were doomed to roam, and forth he hastened strong and fleet, and grasped at moonbeams glistening. Through woven woods and elven home, she lightly fled on dancing feet, and left him lonely still to roam in the silent forest listening. He heard there oft the flying sound of feet as light as linden leaves, or music welling underground in hidden hollows quavering. Now withered lay the hemlock sheaves, and one by one with sighing sound, whispering fell the beechen leaves, in the wintry woodland wavering. He sought her ever, wandering far, where leaves of years were thickly strewn, by light of moon and ray of star, and frosty heavens shivering. Her mantle glinted in the moon, as on a hilltop high and far she danced, and at her feet was strewn a mist of silver quivering. When winter passed, she came again, and her song released the sudden spring, like rising lark and falling rain and melting water bubbling. He saw the elven flower spraying about her feet and healed again. He longed by her to dance and sing upon the grass untroubling. Again she fled, but swift he came, Tinuville, Tinuville. He called her by her elvish name, and there she halted, listening. One moment stood she, and a spell his voice laid on her. Baron came, and doom fell on Tinuville, that in his arms lay glistening. As Baron looked into her eyes, within the shadows of her hair, the trembling starlight of the skies, he saw their mirrored shimmering. Tinuville, the elven fair, immortal maiden, elven wise, about him cast her shadowy hair, and arms like silver glimmering. Long was the way that fate them bore, o'er stony mountains cold and grey, through halls of iron and darkling door, in woods of nightshade moraless. The sundering seas between them lay, and yet at last they met once more. And long ago they passed away in the forest, singing sorrowless. I guessed these chapters would help you in liking the poems. Your favorite is Gimli's poem in Khazad-dûm, full of glory and sadness. Well, we haven't gotten there yet, but I'm sure now that I've had my character arc here, I'll love it. Tolkien had this unfinished long poem of Luthien Tinuville called The Lay of Luthien. It has like 4,000 lines. Can you imagine having captured someone's heart that writes like this? And them writing poems of that nature for you? Please. And that would be so beautiful. That was honestly, I will say, before we move on to what happens next, because I know we skipped a little bit ahead to follow Wild's comment in the community section, but I wrote heart-wrenching story because obviously then we come to find out that Tinuville rescued Baron from the dangers of Sauron, but then Baron was slain by a wolf that came from the gates of Angband, and he died in the arms of Tinuville. But she chose mortality, and to die from the world so that she might follow him. Are we supposed to be okay after that? Are we? If I hadn't needed to carry on and read about 20 more pages to finish the reading, I think I would have put this book down for like 2 weeks just to recover. What in the emotional damage was happening in just that story alone? And then pair that with, we finish this story, and then all of a sudden, I'm going to go back to directly reading Wild's comment. As soon as the story ends, they look up and see something dark against the glimmer of the moonrise. Frodo feels a creeping dread over his heart now that Strider was no longer speaking. Sam freaks out and dares not to leave the dell. Merry reports seeing multiple shapes darker than the night approaching, and Strider prepares them for battle. Something that is incredibly interesting here is that a lot of what is happening, they're feeling rather than seeing. And that is so very scary. There's so many moments I felt something was creeping up the slope. Frodo felt a cold dread creeping over his heart. Like, they're not seeing the reality of what's happening, but they're feeling it, and that feeling is very real and very important nonetheless. Wait till you read that story in this the Silmarillion. Man, I'm gonna be reading Lord of the Rings for the rest of my life, though. I'm just kidding. I'm so glad I'm taking my time. We're taking our time doing sections of this because we've had so much to talk about every week. I don't even know. I would have needed to do a 24-hour stream to discuss just that one entire book if we hadn't broken this up into chapters and sections and books. Oh my God. So I think the feeling rather than seeing is incredibly terrifying. So we get this beautiful story, and then all of a sudden they're getting attacked. And that juxtaposition does not evade me. I think there's a good bit of juxtaposition always in this book. It's almost like anytime this little brevity or lightness, I know something really bad is about to happen. Anytime we get a little joke or a little laughter or a little song, I know we're about to be the Barrow Downs, or we're going to be hunted by the, like, all 9 of the Dark Riders. It's almost like, it's not in a bad way, but it's like predictable to a sense where it's like, I want to enjoy this beautiful moment, but now I'm even more scared somehow. I think The Hobbit's feeling these things really makes it more immersive. Agreed. The reader feels it too. It's so much better than telling us what they see. Yes, agreed. Imagine Lord of the Ring with 50 Shades of Grey plot. Wait, that's Game of Thrones. I've never seen Game of Thrones. That's funny. I've only heard about it. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, now we can rewind to the beginning and we can go to chapter 11. So, did we not read chapter 10 this? No, we did read chapter 10 this week. But chapter 11, A Knife in the Dark. Oh my God. When I almost forgot about the terrifying, we have fun, and Tolkien's like, gotcha, truly. Tolkien's like, here, I'm gonna give you this gift. It's wrapped. Unwrap it. Enjoy it. I have a second gift for you. Turn around. And then it's terrifying. Okay, so let's continue talking about the Dark Riders, because we're gonna go back to when the Dark Riders, at the beginning of chapter 11, when the Dark Riders invade Crick Hollow, which is terrifying. I thought that Fatty was gonna die. I was like, Fatty's dead. I cannot believe he got out of that story alive. I feel like Tolkien doesn't necessarily kill for the sake of like the plot, or like he doesn't kill for the sake of drama or like baiting a reaction. I almost feel like he saves people. It would have been really easy for him to kill Fatty and get like an emotional something or other from people, and to be fair, you could say that Fatty living also gave that, but I don't think we had enough of a. It's important for sure, but he's not a character we know a ton about. But I was glad that he lived regardless. So the Black Riders raid the House of Crick Hollow. Fatty Bulger feels the fear that has been growing on him all day reach a peak. So he wakes up. He's unable to rest. He wakes up, and he sees the black figures, and that's when he bolts away. He knows he has to make a run. It says he knew that he must run for it or perish. So he runs up, and it's kind of a little silly because he can't really make sense or like actually tell people what's happening. No one really understands. Like they understand just enough that they need to like sound the alarms. But he's not saying anything that people understand. Because he just yells, no, no, no. He was crying, no, not me. I haven't got it. And then everyone in Crick Hollow is like, I guess, or not Crick Hollow, and Brandywine is like, I guess we've got to sound the alarms. Tolkien doesn't kill for plot or story or reaction. He saves those things. And yeah, he saves those. Agreed. It has to have a meaning, I think. We haven't necessarily had anyone die, right? Yet? I don't think so. Okay. Yes, he peers out into the gloom and the brooding threat in the breathless night air. A phenomenal way to phrase enemies outside. The writing, honestly, so it evokes such a fear. There was so much good writing that evokes the deepest bone-chilling fears that I think I've ever experienced. He notices a black shadow move under the trees. The gate opens and closes of its own accord without sound. Terror seizes him and he shrinks away before closing and locking the door. Time passes, perhaps hours. 3 black figures enter the gate and surround the house. They just stand there, as still as the shadows of stone, while night goes slowly on. Then we get to the cold hour before dawn. One knocks and demands that the door be opened in the name of Mordor. Which, like, okay, be Captain Obvious. Let us know exactly who you are. Thank you. It turns out, okay, because Fatty Bulger had run, I can even make an argument that Fatty, having the nerve to run away a couple hours before they knocked, is responsible for the success of our heroes. Actually, so well said. That... the fact, because we don't know until they've opened the door that Fatty had already run away. And, oh, sorry, Buckland. It's Buckland. It's the Brandywine is the river. I apologize for calling it the wrong thing. But that, I would agree. They find out rather quickly that the ring isn't there. But I do think Fatty had an important role there in, like, getting them out. Well, one could also say, actually, I don't know. It's fair. It's a fair comment, regardless. The Black Riders ride down the guards at the gate in Buckland, but those are the only deaths we've seen so far. Oh, yeah. You're right. And that's kind of, even then, it's like, it's kind of glossed over, you know? It's not necessarily a big... we don't linger on that. Not that those lives aren't important, but it was easy for me to miss, so to say. Ooh, let's examine the fighting tactics of the Black Riders. Okay. Wow, this is such a phenomenal recap of things. Thank you so much for writing this. Read the Luthien poem. Strider mentions that Baron was the son of Barahir. The name of Barahir is mentioned in the movie, but it's easy to miss. There's a moment I remember that story felt reminiscent from the movie, but it's told in a different way, isn't it? Maybe I'm wrong. I kind of thought that Elrond and Aragorn took on that story. Maybe? I don't know. Okay, we're gonna discuss the fighting tactics of the Black Riders. The Black Riders are somewhat, so we've discussed, and I'm reading again off of what Wild put in the community section, how the Black Riders are somewhat synonymous with fear. And you think that idea is borne out in a big way here. The contingent of Black Riders in Crick Hollow could easily overpower Frodo in that house, but they chose not to. They sit outside the house for hours, sending forth some brooding threat and or a feeling of fear. Then when they feel they must have broken their will of their quarry, those in the house, they resist. They knock and make their presence tangible, but they only physically interact when they think the will to resist must be broken. So well said. It's related. We may or may not hear more later. Oh, thank you. Beautiful. Saruman mentions the ring of Barahir while taking... Oh, thank you. Hi, James. In the movie, Saruman mentions that. Thank you. Okay. This is a great time to say, because I think we've talked about the symbolism of the ring a little bit too in the past, and what like the ring or the power of the ring is or could be. And I think that this element of the Black Riders being synonymous with this element of fear is very powerful, because you have this deep bone-chilling fear, and it doesn't take action as much as it intimidates. And it's kind of similar with the ring, and then the ring and the fear come together in this sense, because we see when Frodo gets attacked, when he puts the ring on, when he crosses the boundary and he leans into the temptation of the ring, right? So the ring could be temptation, perhaps, let's say. He leans into the temptation of the ring. That's when the fear sees him. He's not... To other people, when he puts on the ring, he's invisible, right? But when he puts on the ring, when the Black Riders are, they can see him and he can see them. And that's how they're able to attack him. At least that's what it seemed like from my perspective and reading perception of it. Which just goes on to add this extra layer of fear and intimidation and like intensity and action not always being the driving force of another action. It's like in the world, in the physical world, an object in motion wants to stay in motion, right? So you would think that in like the mental world, like action triggers action, but that's not necessarily true. Inaction can just as often trigger action in your brain. Like not hearing from someone can trigger anxiety. Not doing something can trigger other feelings. Maybe you feel like you dropped the ball, or like inaction has just as much power as action. And the Black Riders are a great example of how inaction, but present in an intimidation, can be just as powerful as like actually doing the thing. I don't know. I'm just going off on a weird psychological tangent. Behind the scenes draft. In one version, Fatty/Folko goes off with Gandalf after the attack and carried all the way to Rivendell. This is when Tolkien is trying to work out what Gandalf is doing at this time. That's... You know what? Yeah, because we still don't know where Gandalf is. We can gather, if we've seen the movies, where Gandalf could be. But we know from the end of book 1, Fellowship of the Ring, book 1, we know very well that even Rivendell hasn't seen. Gandalf has not made it to Rivendell. The elves heard of our fate, but it was not from Gandalf. It was, do we know where they heard it from? Or just that they'd heard, I think they just heard it from people on the streets, essentially. Putting on the ring certainly helped the Black Riders. They may have found him even without it, but it put a target on his back. Yeah. I will say it's almost like putting on the ring, though, did save the rest of the group. I don't know. They could have been more collateral damage. But because the Black Riders were like, nope, it's you we want, they were able to like pinpoint him because they feed off of and they can feel the energy of the ring. So and especially when the ring is on, it's more powerful, if my understanding is correct. So the moment he put the ring on, which was so beautifully written, because let me find that, the temptation of the ring and it not being like a fully conscious act. Okay. Soon there could be no doubt. 3 or 4 tall black figures were standing there on the slope, looking down on them. So black were they that they seemed like black holes in the deep shade behind them. Frodo thought he heard a faint hiss as a venomous breath and felt a thin, piercing chill. Then the shapes slowly advanced. Terror overcame Pippin and Merry, and they threw themselves flat on the ground. Sam shrank to Frodo's side. Frodo was hardly less terrified than his companions. He was quaking as if he was bitter cold, but his terror was swallowed up in a sudden temptation to put on the ring. The desire to do this laid hold of him, and he could think of nothing else. He did not forget the barrow, nor the message of Gandalf, but something seemed to be compelling him to disregard all warnings, and he longed to yield, not with the hope of escape or of doing anything, either good or bad. He simply felt that he must take the ring and put it on his finger. He could not speak. He felt Sam looking at him, as if he knew that his master was in some great trouble, but he could not turn towards him. He shut his eyes and struggled for a while, but resistance became unbearable, and at last he slowly drew out the chain and slipped the ring on the forefinger of his left hand. Oh, I doubt very much that Frodo's friends would be in danger if he were not with them. So funny you say that, because who else said that But Glorfindel, God bless him, because Frodo doesn't later, this is skipping ahead into chapter 12, Flight of the Ford, when after Frodo's been pierced and they're trying to get to Rivendell, and they've been going for days, a grueling like 10 days, and finally they find, Glorfindel finds them, who there have been like 4 different elves who are sent out in all 4 directions to find them, to search for them. And so he puts him on his horse. Glorfindel puts him on his horse, right? And Frodo's like, I will not leave my friends. I shall not ride him if I am to be carried off to Rivendell or anywhere else, leaving my friends behind in danger. Glorfindel smiled. I doubt very much, he said, if your friends would be in danger if you were not with them. Anyway, I thought it was sassy and I loved it. Who else said that? My favorite character, really? Wait, is there another person who says it? Who had said it? Was it Tom Bombadil? Hit me with it. I'm forgetful. I am incredibly forgetful, but you know. It is an important thing though, because his friends wouldn't be in danger if it wasn't for him. Oh, Glorfindel is your favorite. He's a good character. He was a good, like, I loved seeing Strider's joy. I think we got a really good dive into Strider. Like, sometimes it was a little more heavy-handed, and by heavy-handed I just mean like it was like Strider lore, like psh, right in your face. Sometimes it was just like little things like Strider's ear was to the ground and we saw him smiling, and then he gets up and he runs out into the road and he's so excited to see this elf, and then, you know, then we know what happens. The elf is like, hey, actually we need to go. There's 5 black riders behind us and we gotta go quickly. The name of Glorfindel was reused from Tolkien's existing tales. Is it the same character? Tolkien eventually decided it was. Oh. Good. I like that he eventually decided. He's like, I don't know. I love that for him. I love that journey he takes, where he's just like, he lets the stories that he writes breathe on their own, versus like forcing his own agenda all the time. He's kind of like, I perceive, right? You know, that and back in the day he was like, you know what? Let me think on that. And then like 2 years later, he's like, you know what? Anyways, they are the same person. I've thought about it a lot, and they are. Okay. So yes. So we talked about the attack, the feeling of fear versus like the feeling and the aura of fear versus the physical interaction. And then if we take that lesson back to the encounter in the dell at Weathertop, again, I'm back to reading from what Wilde has said. I argue that the exact same thing has happened this night. The cold increased as night came on. Maybe this is a statement on weather, or maybe the feeling of the beginning of fear. No, I think the weather can always be a symbolism for what's to come. The land quickly falls to shadow and the hobbits huddle together. Is this an instinctive fear response? Strider stops Frodo from speaking the proper noun Mordor and declares the servants of the enemy to be at hand. Are they here now? Sam says. The darkness presses on him closely. As soon as the story ends, Frodo feels a creeping dread set on his heart. Sam dares not leave the dell. Merry reports seeing multiple dark shapes on the slopes. Eventually 3 or 4 tall black figures are observed staring down at them into the dell before slowly advancing. So they did use the same tactics, a very like, we're going to intimidate you, you're going to be terrified. And that too builds up this tension, I think, in Frodo, right? Of like, if they would have just attacked, he wouldn't have had time to consider putting on the ring. But because they didn't just attack, he had this tension mount and build up to finally he was like, I'm going to put this ring on. I'm feeling this temptation from the ring and this fear from what this oncoming attack. Lots and lots of tension building in these chapters, Eric, so much. And we don't truly get, I mean, we get like some reprieve from the tension building, right? Because we see that like the water rushes down and takes out some of the Black Riders in the end. But we don't really, then Frodo all of a sudden, what we can assume is he collapses or faints or whatever. So we don't necessarily make it to any destination. There's no reprieve. We're stuck in the tension until you start book 2, which I have not started yet. Because I think I said this last week. I only read the like couple of chapters that I say we're going to talk about so that I don't accidentally like have in mind future parts of the book when we are discussing. It helps me keep an honest conversation here. But yeah, so much tension. Okay. I posit then that the Black Riders surrounded them in that dell and began to exude their aura of fear as night came on. They stood on the slopes and cast their brooding threat down onto them for hours that evening. All as Strider told them tales of old kingdoms of elves and men. Strider must anticipate this. He coached the hobbits on what to do now that their position was compromised. So what does Strider do? He tells them the tale of Tinneviel, a story of pure love and hope, which is the antidote to fear. No. So what Wilde is saying here is that this is so incredibly carefully crafted where Strider knows what's going on, because Strider is wise, right? Strider probably did know. So he gives them this story that gives them what they will need to embrace the fight that Strider knows is going to come. Because Strider knows, maybe Strider doesn't know exactly where the Black Riders are in the moment he tells the story, but he knows they're coming. That's so beautifully said. When the Black Riders assault them, they're not overtaken. Their hearts, especially Frodo's, hold. Wow. I love this positioning of this story, this love, this hope, these, like, it wasn't just a story of love and hope, it was a story to make sure the hobbits had what they needed inside for when they were going to be attacked. And I'm behind you on that 100%. 100%. So ends the bits I most desperately wanted to discuss. I just think the idea of love and hope being the antidote to fear is very thematic throughout this, but is often subtle like it is here. I'm gonna think about that a lot. Yeah. And I would even add on to that to say that we see this time and time again, that Frodo is a remarkable hobbit, so to say, right? And he has this strength within him that is kind of unlikely, not necessarily for a hobbit, but for a being. Because we know we can, well, I don't know if we would say we know yet. I mean, well, we do from Gollum, like we can presume from the stories of Gollum that the ring is not an easy temptation to withhold from. But this fellowship, which I know we don't technically have a created fellowship, but this little tiny pre-fellowship fellowship that we currently have, and then the pre-fellowship fellowship to the fellowship, which I would say is Gandalf and Bilbo when they all lived in the Shire, or when Bilbo and Frodo lived together in the Shire. And this like growing of community is like having these pillars of community and people who know who you are and hold you to the standards of who they expect you to be are critical to living up to your own expectations and to others' expectations. And I will say, expectations are not everything. Like, take that with a grain of salt, because if you're going to put yourself into an unhappy 9 to 5 to make other people proud, like, life isn't worth that maybe. But like, I'm talking more like character, like who you are in the world, how you treat other people, the choices you make that affect other people around you, that having that community, those pillars in your life to keep you strong and hold you up when the temptation and the fear hit are really, really important. And to have these examples of love and hope around you too. We even see Frodo struggle with the temptation of the ring. Early on, Gandalf tells him to throw it in the fire to discover the writing, and he can't even do that. It's true. And we saw it in Bilbo. We absolutely saw that temptation in Bilbo. And we get little glimmerings that, like, it's the power of the ring and the temptation of the ring is perhaps too much, or perhaps like no one can withstand it, and it will take years for it to fade away. And even Gandalf says he's not capable of. Does Gandalf ask for the ring? Is that correct? I remember Gandalf saying, like, in his hands. I remember even Gandalf being afraid of the power of the ring. He probably did ask for the ring. I'm probably glossing over that in my memory, but yeah, it's a great point regardless, Michael. Okay. So if we circle back to chapter 10. So we've got this chapter with Strider. We've got this chapter where there's a lot of chapter 10, I think, oddly enough, might be my favorite chapter. Because I think it's so, I mean, this chapter was the shortest chapter, right? For me, it was started at page 204 and ends at page 219. But there's so much, like, character building in it, and you get to see in these little cracks of personality in each person that shine through because of tension or because of the like what's going on around them. And it's, yeah, I loved chapter 10. Are you using the map? In the edition my father had, there was a wonderful fold out map in the back of the book. There's a map. It doesn't fold out, but I do have a few maps at the back of the book, and even maybe at the front of the book, maybe just at the back of the book. Oh, there's one right here. Oh, this is a part of the I've got the map of the Shire at the front and then at the back. No, I haven't really. I actually meant to go look back at it. Because let's see if I can figure out. Frodo was reluctant to give it to Gandalf. Yes, you are correct. Frodo's like, Well, Gandalf gets a little scary, remember? Gandalf does get a little bit terrifying. It's actually quite... I don't know. I don't know that I know where I am on any of these maps. I'm gonna be honest. Because we're not in Rohan or Gondor. Or Mordor, right? The try now that I was remembering was when he tells Frodo to try to melt it. Yeah. Yep. Try to melt it. Frodo with... There's the Shire. Here's the map small, but yeah, I don't know. I've never been able to find like the places. Okay, there's Bree. Rivendell. Oh, wow. It actually looks so much closer. Oh, there's Weathertop. Okay. I don't know if you'll be able to see this because of the blur. Old Forest, Bree, Weathertop, Rivendell, Last Bridge. Oh. Oh, wow. Wow. We're far northwest of Rohan, Gondor, and Mordor, correct? Okay, yeah. Yeah, we're in Eriador. Maybe. The Lost Realm of Arnor. I think. There's a lot of writing on this map. Hold on, I can turn off the blur. There's a lot of writing on my map. I'm sure that's the same one. So this is the Shire. I don't have a great camera, so it's not gonna show up too well. But the Shire, and then the Barrow Downs. That's the Old Forest, the Barrow Downs, and then Bree. And then this is Weathertop. And then the Last Bridge, and then that's Rivendell. So there's the ford. There's a detailed set of maps not made by Tolkien, published in 1981, called Journeys of Frodo. Okay, I'll look into that. Thank you. Okay, great. The Shire is embedded in Eriador, yes. Arnor contains the lands east of Bree to the ford of the Brunnen. You all know so much. It's so astounding. It's so astounding. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with me too. It means so much. Every week I'm blown away by it. I'm also blown away by what you guys bring, like everything you guys bring to discuss and add on, and in the conversations we're able to have. Christopher was the cartographer. Just for info, I don't know if it's still in print. Okay. No worries. No worries. All right, we can, even though chapter 10 was my favorite, just because I thought it had a little bit of personality additions, we got to know a little bit more about Strider. We got conclusions on the innkeeper, and we got conclusions on who Strider was and what Strider knew and whatnot, and we got that letter from Gandalf. So we we do see Butterbur tell us not to work with Aragorn, aka Strider, aka the Ranger, and we see and hear about how the people of Bree feel about Rangers and why they could be bad. But then Frodo makes the decision before this that he trusts Strider and he wants to work with Strider. And then we get this letter from Gandalf that was supposed to have made it to us in the Shire, and it never did. And in the letter it says, you may meet a friend of mine on the road, a man lean, dark, tall, by some called Strider. He knows our business and will help you. And then it says, PPS, make sure that it is the real Strider. There are many strange men on the roads. His true name is Aragorn. I particularly enjoy how Lip said last week that she thought chapter 10 would be her favorite, and now that she's read it, she still thinks it's her favorite. Look, I love Aragorn, so it's just probably biased. It's probably biased, but I thought it was well written, and it was like it was so short and sweet. Behind the scenes draft. In the early draft, all the hobbits in our group had aliases like Frodo does in the final version. They were Mr. Brown, Mr. Green, Mr. Rivers. Ooh. All earthy names. Also, I did find out, obviously, at the very beginning of chapter 10, we find out that the dark shadow that came in over the fence was Strider and not Gollum. And thank you for those that were live last week with me that didn't spoil that for me, but I will say, if you're watching this post haste, be mindful, because a few people did comment and they were like, that's Strider, you dummy. And I was like, I hadn't read chapter 10 yet, don't spoil it for me, please. But it happens like right at the beginning of chapter 10, so easy probably to confuse where we're at in the book if you're not reading right along with it. So we find out that Strider had followed them in. We also find out that Strider had heard them discussing everything. So, like, they're not very good. The hobbits are not very good at being secretive. Even when they're trying to be secretive, they're just not aware. Granted, Strider, Ranger, Aragorn, whatever we want to call him in whatever moment, has a very unique ability to hear things and see things and be more of a shadow in the dark and unseen. But, you know, it's yes. Oh, so there's a poem in the letter from Gandalf, and it's about Strider. And then Strider pulls out shows them his sword, but then we'll come to find out that he has a broken sword on him. So it's the broken sword, or it's a broken sword. And oh my God, wait, this really got me. This is probably why I love this chapter, because we're talking to Strider, right? So Frodo asks, why didn't you tell me that you were Gandalf's friend first? Like, why didn't you start with that? In any case, I did not intend to tell you all about myself at once. I had to study you first and make sure of you. The enemy has set traps for me before now. As soon as I had made up my mind, I was ready to tell you whatever you asked, but I must admit, he added with a laugh, that I hoped you would take to me for my own sake. A hunted man sometimes wearies of distrust and longs for friendship, but there I believe my looks are against me. It was so sweet. It was so endearing. Oh my God. The filmmakers said that a broken sword looked a bit silly and would require an explanation for the Hobbit. So there were multiple versions of the Strider chapter. Versions differ in who has the letter. Butterbird Trotter, when was it written? Who saw the Black Riders? Where's Gandalf? Oh, that like exist in the books that were published, you mean? Yeah, I don't, let me see. I think you're right, because we get I'm trying to remember if he had shown his sword prior, because I remember he like kind of threatened Sam with it, or he kind of like pulled back his whatever and was like, I've got a sword and I'll use it, but like I haven't used it and that's why you should trust me. And then, oh yeah. So actually it's after the poem is written or read, I think he like kind of shows off that he has a sword on him, and then even after that, he's talking about the poem. Frodo says, I believed that you were a friend before the letter came, or at least I wished to. You have frightened me several times tonight, but never in the way that servants of the enemy would, or so I imagine. I see, laughed Strider. I look foul and feel fair. Is that it? All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost, recalling the poem that was in Gandalf's letter. Did the verse apply to you then? Asked Frodo. I could not make out what they were about, but how did you know that they were in Gandalf's letter if you have never seen it? I did not know, he answered, but I am Aragorn, and those verses go with that name. He drew out his sword, and they saw that the blade was indeed broken, a foot below the hilt. Not much use is it, Sam, said Strider, but the time is near when it shall be forged anew. Yeah, so it's not until after, well, and I guess technically it's not like Frodo read that letter out loud, so I guess the poem wasn't read aloud to the room, I don't think, but, you know. It was read aloud to us. He does, yes. Yep, that's what I was saying. He pulls it after the poem. So we get the letter, we get the poem. We even get the moment where he like threatens Sam with the sword, with the concept of the sword. He threatens Sam with the sword. He just doesn't pull the sword out. Does that make sense? He's like, I've got a sword, Sam. And then he's like, but also, now you can see this sword is broken, actually. All that is gold does not glitter. We find out later that this poem was written by Bilbo. Oh. Huh. I didn't know that part. Yeah, the full poem is, I think it's worth reading. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. Kind of a very telling poem about who Aragorn is. Why was Strider carrying the useless sword around? Because it's an important sword. One can imagine. It is a great question. If it's, yeah. There are definitely certain elements of this that I have a leg up. So I feel I don't question as much because I have the insight of the movies. But that is a great, why are you carrying around this broken sword? I mean, great, it's in this poem and all, but then I guess if you go back to reanalyze the poem and then you're like, the crownless again shall be king, if this entire poem is about Aragorn, then if you really read that poem and you piece together that poem is about Aragorn, and you're like, oh, so you are a really important dude, huh? It's sharp enough. It just has shorter reach than a not broken one. In the film, Arwen has a voiceover of this poem. I love finding out how they incorporated the poems in. Gandalf does not mention the sword that was broken in his history. What do you mean? It's in the letter he sent. I mean, it has a fit of blade like dagger with a long handle. Okay. Anyway. So, chapter 11, we see... Oh, Wild is checking your query. Okay, thank you. Oh, okay. This is important. When Frodo fights the Black Captain, he cries out, "Oh, Elbereth Gilthoniel." Remember how he identified Gildor's company as high elves, the goodest of good people, because they spoke the name of Elbereth Gilthoniel, and then Frodo uses that. Strider does tell us that saying Elbereth was more harmful than the weapon, because Strider, after Frodo gets hit, Strider leaves like 2 or 3 times, and at one point he comes back. Let me find it. At one point he comes back. Was it? It's in chapter 12. Okay. One point Strider comes back. He lifts from the ground a black cloak that had been laying there hidden by the darkness. A foot above the lower hem there was a slash. This was the stroke of Frodo's sword, he said. The only hurt that it did to his enemy, I fear, for it is unharmed. But all blades perish the pierce that dreadful king. More deadly to him was the name of Elbereth. We also find out at the beginning of chapter 12 that the Dark Riders are so confident that Frodo's going to die and that Frodo has been hit. Or I don't even know if it's a confidence that Frodo's going to die, because I can't tell if it's like Frodo's going to die or because the blade had evil on it and then the wound heals and there's just like a white line there. If the evil is what's like inside of him and that like will turn him entirely evil and then he'll just bring the ring to them. Or if they were just waiting for him to die. Oh, the question was whether we had heard of the sword before Gandalf's letter. No, we had not. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for adding that context. And then re-adding it when I got even more confused. Yes, so those names are important. We see those names come back because at the end of chapter 12, so we're on like a 10-day journey. We get lost a couple of times. We're doing our best. We're trying not to stay on the main roads because the main roads are easier for them to find us and to track us. We find this little elven like leaf, silver leaf on the ground, and we think that's a sign to like pass over this bridge. We come to find out that it was indeed a sign to pass over the bridge. That was from Glorfindel. He'd left that there as a symbol for us, I believe, something of that nature. We pass over that. We find this area. One of my favorite parts of chapter 12, we get this little hint of Bilbo lore in like Bilbo's old stories, where we get a little glimpse of it before we hit it, right? And Frodo says, this sounds like Frodo's on the horse, so he can just look around, right? He's hurt, he can't walk. He's looking around, he sees something that reminds him of a story Bilbo had told him, and he asks, do trolls live here? And Strider was like, no, trolls don't live here. They keep wandering on. They come to find these 3 trolls. And the way that it's told is really scary because at first it's like, there's 3 trolls, trolls, we're in troll territory. And then it's, hold on, I think oh, we're forgetting our family history. These must be the very 3 that were caught by Gandalf, quarreling over the right way to cook 13 dwarves and 1 hobbit. I believe the 1 hobbit was probably Bilbo. Hi, Rachie. And I just thought that this little moment for laughter, for lore, for reprieve, and then of course we have the like final moments of being hunted, but not before Sam sings us another song about trolls, and we get this moment from Frodo, which is kind of sweet, but also, I don't know, it's so Sam sings us this song, and then Frodo goes, it's out of his own head, of course. I am learning a lot about Sam Gamgee on this journey. First he was a conspirator, now he's a jester. He'll end up becoming a wizard or a warrior. And then Sam goes, I hope not. I don't want to be neither. And for those moments where I'm like, Sam is not as endearing in the book as he is in the movie, he was here. The little song, his shyness after it, he was like, never mind, I don't really want to talk about where this came from. And then like Frodo kind of seeing him for more than just his employee was a really beautiful, touching moment. And then of course all shit breaks loose. So it was great to have that little moment before we're running for our lives. They are confident that Frodo will soon be turned to their purpose. Whether that is turning him into one of them or killing him, our protagonists are not entirely sure. Yeah, and we'll never find out because, well, I assume we'll never find out. Because we've got a whole nother book to go. Just in Fellowship of the Ring, and then there's 2 more full books. 2 more books of 2. 2 more books of 2 books. It's really confusing. I will say, Tolkien, you made it really hard to run a book club because it's very hard to say book 1 of Fellowship of the Ring, book 1 of book 1, essentially. And then next week we'll start book 2 of book 1. Generally in those languages, the vowels are pronounced short and separate. Okay. I will try to remember that, Michael. Sam's troll song. This was one song about Tom, based on an existing song poem about Tom Bombadil that was sung by Bingo / Frodo in the inn in the draft. Oh, funny! And then it got moved to this moment, and it is a perfect moment. And I think I really enjoy that it's sung by Sam. That's, I think, really cute. It's also just a really silly song. And so then we get back on the roads. We hear the way that we first hear hoofs, and then come to find out that it's Glorfindel, which is so well done. Like, we've talked about, the tension build up in these 3 chapters is so very, 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 very good. It's very well done. These chapters, some of the adventure parts of these chapters is really dense. Like the 10 days of traveling where not a lot's happening after Weathertop is kind of like grudging to get through. But then we get these moments of like tension where it's like, then all of a sudden there's hoof prints behind us again. And Strider has his ear to the ground, which, hold on, let me read that line because I think that's one of my favorite pieces of writing. Okay. So we hear like a bell on the horse. And Frodo says, that does not sound like a Black Rider's horse. The other hobbits agreed hopefully that it did not, but they all remained full of suspicion. They had been in fear of pursuit for so long that any sound from behind seemed ominous and unfriendly. But Strider was now leaning forward, stooped to the ground with a hand to his ear and a look of joy on his face. And I thought that was such a beautiful, beautiful phrasing of that. And again, Glorfindel is Wild's favorite character, as they say, their favorite character. But that's really okay, since most of my love for him is mostly tied up in things that we do not learn in these chapters. 5 of the Black Riders fled from his approach. Thank you for saying that, because actually I glossed over that a little bit. When we meet Glorfindel and he's telling us about the Black Riders that are out there and hunting for them, we've had essentially 10 days without any sight nor sound of them. But Glorfindel hasn't. He's been chasing them off, which just means he's got the elves in general, but specifically Glorfindel, must have these like really powerful fear. I don't know. Like, they're not to be messed with. For references, I use book, chapter, and blank line paragraphs like 1.3.2. I think it's the same in any edition. So like book, chapter, blank line. Well, what I was talking more so about was like, or did you put something in somewhere? I'm talking more about like to market the book club. It's hard, I think, for people who aren't like huge knowers that the books are split into 2. It's hard to be like, book 1 of the first book, book 1 of Fellowship of the Ring is like it's a hard way to market a book club. Granted, a lot of people are coming here that have already read it, but like if people haven't, it's quite a confusing way to tell people what parts of which book we're reading. Because I think even when I announced it, someone was like, you're not going to start book 2 on 9/11. And I said, no, I'm starting book 2 of book 1 on Monday, the 11th of September. Because it's confusing. But that's neither here nor there. That's just on my logistical side of things. That's just a little funny rant I was going on. Okay, so yeah, we get news that there's nine riders coming for us, and I too love that Frodo was willing to stand and fight 3 volumes. Yeah, but that's not, I don't know. You've got to, when you do things like this, you have to like market it in ways that anyone will understand. And there's some like, I don't think like Gen Pop knows that these books are broken into 2 books. If that makes sense. As Frodo is fading, he sees a shining figure of white light. This was shown in the film as the white light Frodo sees when Arwen first approaches. Oh, you know what I almost passed over? I loved how we saw... Wait, no, then that wouldn't have been... Or maybe it would have been. I don't know. Never mind. I don't want to talk about that. At this point in the story, the Black Riders are relatively weak compared to their full might. But Glorfindel is not a mere elf. He's described as an elf lord when he first greets Frodo. Thank you for, yes, sorry, but I'll put some more respect on Glorfindel's name. He is an elf lord, not just an elf. But he clearly is very powerful, even if the riders are not as powerful as they once were, or if they're feeling weaker for whatever reason. But so we go through this fight. It's so well written, or not even a fight, it's just kind of an evading, right? And Glorfindel put Frodo on the horse. Craig, hello. And the horse is like trained to run when there's danger, and Glorfindel does have to like force the horse to go. I wasn't clear if Frodo was pausing the horse at certain moments or if Glorfindel was. I feel like it was Frodo, and then Glorfindel had to remind the horse to go. That's not at all what we're here to talk about, so I'm just going to remove that, Greg. We're talking about Lord of the Rings, book 1 of Fellowship of the Ring, chapters 10 through 12. So we get on the horse. "Ride forward, ride," cried Glorfindel to Frodo, and he did not obey at once, for a strange reluctance seized him. So that leads me to believe that that's something else that I want. Okay, there it is. That it was Frodo who was pausing, and then suddenly he knew in his heart that they were silently commanding him to wait. Yeah, so it was Frodo. And then they Noralim, Asphaleth, cries Glorfindel, and the horse runs. And then at that moment, that's when the riders start speeding after Frodo and the horse. Does the horse have a name? I wish it did. I would call it by its name. Maybe it does. If anyone knows, I bet Wild knows. Does the horse have a name? So it's so well written because it's so tenseful. We know that there's 5 behind him, and but the horse that Frodo is on is fast enough to get past those 5. But there's 4 that were waiting in ambush. So we hear this bone-chilling cry from one group to the other group, and the other group comes out and ambushes from the sides, right? Those are the ones we're not sure we can get by. So Frodo just essentially closes his eyes and puts his trust in the horse, and I almost thought that the horse started flying the way that it was written. Because it said something about wings, but it was as if the horse had wings. It was just like speeding past them. And then the horse that we're on is able to get across the ford really not easily, I would say, but gets across the ford. Frodo heard a splash of water. It foamed about his feet. He felt the quick heave and surge as the horse left the river and struggled up the stony path. And then he was climbing the steep bank. He was across the ford. But then we have this moment. We have like an entire page and a half where we're the horse's name is Asphaleth. Oh, okay, so that in that he was commanding the horse. Thank you. My understanding is also that Frodo checked Asphaleth up at the first to fight, and then at the behest of the Black Riders, Glorfindel then urges, yes, I think so. When I'm rereading it, that's kind of what came across to me as well. In an early set of notes, Tom Bombadil drives back the Barrow-wights with his power, later changed to a note about Tom driving away Black Riders on the road. Oh. This is the origin of the line that Frodo had not the power of Bombadil when he tried to stand up to the riders at the ford. Asphaleth, probably Anglo-Saxon. I'm not too sure on the the origins of the name Asphaleth, Craig, but it is a great name. A lot of the names in this book are very sometimes I just let it be what it is, and I say it the best of my ability, and I'm probably wrong more times than I'm not, but I'm lucky enough to know a good portion of the names because of the movies, so I take that as a W. Let's take a moment for Frodo's strength and his power once he crosses the ford, because Frodo, let's not forget that this entire time Frodo has been deeply injured for days. We've been traveling for, I believe at one point they say we're 10 days away from Weathertop, and then that's a little bit before this, so this is probably 12 days since Frodo has been stabbed, and he gets across the ford and he sees the 9 horses at the water's edge. It says Frodo's spirit quailed before the threat of their uplifted faces, and they start to taunt him. They start to taunt him because Frodo says, go back to the land of Mordor and follow me no more, which is so brave of him. And it's like, he's doing his best, right? And they just laugh in his face. His voice sounded thin and shrill in his own ears. The riders halted, but Frodo had not the power of Bombadil. There we go. His enemies laughed at him with a harsh and chilling laughter. Come back, they called. To Mordor we will take you. And it's so... like they're so unserious about it. I feel they still in this moment are like, kid, stop. I mean, I know Frodo's a 50-year-old man, but it's Sindarin, the language of the elves in Middle Earth. Sindarin seems to be based loosely in Welsh. Cool. It was his publisher's suggestion to divide the books in 3 books. Yeah, well, yeah, because to him, to Tolkien, this is it's all one book. All 3 books, like 6 books inside, are one book. Yeah. If he were alive, and he would hate if we called it like a trilogy or whatever. It says it in the like notes or whatever. I laughed at it. I enjoy these book clubs. Thank you, Khalid. Thank you. I enjoy them as well. So let's give Frodo his last little moments before we wrap up for the day with some last quotes from Nick in the community section and anything else we want to talk about. So we have this callback. So they're kind of taunting Frodo from the bottom. They start to try to cross the river. There's like 2 or 3 in the water. And Frodo decides to lift up the sword in a last effort. By Elberth and Luthien the Fair, you shall have neither the ring nor me. This doesn't stop them though, right? The leader, who's halfway across the ford, stood up menacing in his stirrups and raised up his hand. Frodo was stricken dumb. He felt his tongue cleave to his mouth and his heart laboring. His sword broke and fell out of his shaking hand. That's Frodo's sword, which is so, like, that would be so terrifying. The elf horse reared and snorted. You almost feel like even the elf horse, Asphaleth, as we've learned the name to be, seems like it wants out of there. And then at that moment there came a roaring and a rushing, a noise of loud waters rolling many stones. Dimly Frodo saw the river below him rise, and down along it course there came a plumed cavalry of waves. White flames seemed to Frodo to flicker on their crests, and he half fancied that he saw amid the water-white riders upon white horses with frothing manes. The 3 riders that were still in the middle of the ford were overwhelmed. They disappeared, buried suddenly under angry foam. Those that were behind drew back in dismay. This is my favorite part, though. Frodo is phenomenal. Frodo does what he needs to do. He pulls forth that last little bit of strength, right? And then his friends, his community, come up from behind. With his last failing senses, Frodo heard cries, and it seemed to him that he saw behind the riders that hesitated on the shore a shining figure of white light. and behind it ran small shadowy forms waving flames that flared red in the gray mist that was falling over the world. The black horses were filled with madness, and leaping forward in terror, they bore their riders into the rushing flood. Their piercing cries were drowned in the roaring of the river as it carried them away. Then Frodo felt himself falling, and the roaring and confusion seemed to rise and engulf him together with his enemies. And he heard and saw no more. And that is where we end. Little kids, stop. I mean, I know Frodo's a 50-year-old man. sorry. I don't want anyone to think I don't know if Frodo's like a grown man, but you know, he's weak. He's just a baby. He's just a weak baby hobbit in that moment. The division into books 1 and 2 is reminiscent of the arrangement of books from Greek and Roman periods. For example, Julius Caesar's conquest of Gaul is divided into books 1 through 10. Amazing. So I've got a few quotes that Nick F., who I don't believe was able to join us tonight, but Nick, if you're out there, thank you for putting these quotes in the community section. Just so anyone knows, they have this space on Monday afternoons. I will post a little moment in the community section of Twitch or of YouTube and say what kind of themes, quotes, etc. do you want to talk about today, and then that's kind of how I base the pacing of what we talk about. And so ends book 1. People say that this is the boring book out of the 6. Hang on, people, we're in for a wild ride. 7% dreams. 7 dreams Frodo has had so far. Thank you for saying that number, because there were a few dreams he was having in these 3 chapters that didn't feel as important, but I was reading. Oh my god, I need to stop talking with my hands. Jail for my hands. I was reading over those dreams a few times, and I was like, they've got to mean something, because Frodo's dreams all seem to mean something so far. So why would he all of a sudden be dreaming things that aren't meaningful? It's just maybe I don't have the context for them yet, whereas some of the dreams I've had context. Some quotes. Let's go. We may have already talked about them, but I'm just going to read them as they are listed here. Oh yes, okay, so we go back to the one, so we'll read it again because I think it's great. It's the quote, it's the poem essentially for, it's Aragorn's poem. All that is gold does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither, deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes of fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king. Talk with your hands if you want, it's fun. I always talk with my hands, but I always hit my microphone. I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and if by life or death I can save you, I will. That's what Strider says to the hobbits when they doubt Strider's identity. I love Aragorn. I'm so excited though for the next 3 chapters. My cut short or long, don't go wrong. Strider to Pippin when the party leaves Bree. Strider was a phenomenal guide. He knew the lands, he knew what to do, and he also knew how to. We wouldn't have survived without Strider. Not reading out Sam's troll poem, then we can read it for the end. I think that would be a fun way to end the day. I'll read it and then I'll just hit end and it'll be gone. I think that would be fun, Michael. We can do that. I am learning a lot about Sam Gamgee on this journey. First, we read this one. First he was a conspirator, now he's a jester. He'll end up by becoming a wizard or a warrior. That's after Sam sings the troll song. You might find it interesting to review these bits of the film now after diving into the book details. Absolutely, I think so. I find that many huge stories like this, books to movies, movies to books, etc., are enhanced when you understand the deeper lore. You had some additional notes too? You can drop them, Andrew. And maybe the ring who was helping those dreams. Oh, Ark, that's such a good point. That's a great point. And Nick also gave some topics. Let me just skim over these real quick. When Strider joins the party, I feel the morale change immediately. Even though we know that danger is on our heels, the confidence and experience of Strider brings a comfort to the story that we have not felt since Gandalf departed in chapters 3. Actually, so true, because the hobbits, they have those like few brief moments with Tom, right? But hobbits, as in nature, are simply a little more loosey-goosey. And so when Strider comes in, Strider is like a strong, confident guide. And we needed that. And I stand by it. If Strider hadn't come into the story would be over. Absolutely. They needed Strider. As much as Sam had his moments of doubting Strider, we needed Strider. The encounter with the Black Riders in chapter 11 is terrifying. I do find it interesting that once Frodo is stabbed, he drops his sword but tightly holds on to the ring. I wonder how hard Frodo is fighting against the ring's influence here. That's really interesting, actually. And I highlighted the way was it at the end of chapter 10? Yes. Okay, so this is when Frodo's struck. At the same time he struck at the feet of his enemy, a shrill cry rang out in the night, and he felt pain like a dart of poisoned ice pierce his left shoulder. Even as he swooned, he caught, as through a swirling mist, a glimpse of Strider leaping out of the darkness with a flaming brand of wood in either hand. With a last effort, Frodo, dropping his sword, slipped the ring from his finger and closed his right hand tight upon it. Yeah. I actually had highlighted that because I think that image also of him like holding it tightly, and then when Frodo came to himself, he was still clutching the ring desperately, is how the next chapter starts. And now I'll read your comments in just a second, Andrew. The flight to the ford of Rivendell feels very different from the scene in the movie. In the movie, Frodo is basically unconscious and being carried by Aragorn until Arwen appears to whisk Frodo away. In chapter 12, the party travels on foot for more than 10 days. Yes, Frodo is lucid the entire time and resists the commands of the Black Riders. It's actually like, yeah, I'm actually surprised this hasn't come up yet in general, because the difference from the movie to the books, from this journey from Weathertop to Rivendell, is wildly different. There's no one there. Frodo has to find that power and that strength within himself. Like, he's not saved. He has to get on a horse and he has to call forth the power to take down the riders. And then of course he's not alone in that. It's much more on Frodo than it was in the movie. In the movie, it's much more he's saved, he's unconscious, he's barely hanging on by a thread, which does it. I wouldn't change it either way. I think in the movie, it's the drama that it needs to be, and in the book, it's the drama that it needs to be. It's a slower paced drama in the book, but it gives time for more lore and more journey and more getting to know everyone that we're with. So Andrew said, Butterbur forgot to send the letter. In BBC Radio, in the book, Frodo says, really old Butterbur has made a mess of things. Yes. It's funny too, because I think even in the letter, Gandalf mentions, like, I hope this letter made to you, Butterbur can be very forgetful like that. BBC Radio. In the radio, Ian Holm, as Frodo says, has made a shocking mess of things. It is quite common to hear the F word rather than the word shocking. We meet Bill the pony. Bill Ferny the man gets hit on the nose with Sam. Oh, I loved that. And that was in the Strider chapter. Thank you very much. Bill Ferny, I actually wrote down a few times that he became much more of an important character than I ever thought he would be. It's kind of like when you meet an NPC in a game and they have a name, and you're like, why do you have a name? You're probably going to be important. Bill Ferny, I wrote off very quickly because I was like, whatever. He just named someone in the bar and they walked away, and then they are the town gossip. And then he just kept coming back. Like, He sold us the horse. He sold information about where we were to the Black Riders. Like, damn, Bill, could you not sit down and shut up for 5 seconds? I was so happy when Sam threw that apple at him. I was so happy. Fuck Bill Fernie, you know? Also, that poor pony was in such bad condition. The ponies flee to Tom Bombadil. He sends them back to Butter. That actually, Butterbur, he made out of that pretty well, didn't he? We haven't talked about Mary going out and following a Black Rider and Brie. What a foolish thing to do. Truly, for chapter 10 being my favorite, we really didn't break down the things that happened in that, because there was not a single chill or common sense moment in that chapter. It's just like, let's invite one stranger into our room. Okay. Oh, also, where's Mary? Oh, okay. We didn't even get to sleep in our beds because people are going to come attack us. Let's buy a horse from the guy who told the people where they could find us. And also, he's selling it to us for much more than expected. And Butterbur has been holding on to this letter for who knows how long, that told us exactly that gave us information that we needed to know. And then we get a pony, except for all of our ponies ran away, except for the pony. It's fine, the ponies went back. I did write in the space where we learn about all the ponies, and then the book takes this little moment to say, like, it's okay, because Butterbur made out of this situation just fine. It's wait, was it in? Oh no, it's in chapter 11 that we leave. My bad. There's a... Okay, yes, I wrote what a beautiful turn of events, but Butterbur did pay for the pony that we took, and which was kind of, he felt responsible for the ponies being released. And then he got sent back the ponies that were the hobbits. So he made out of it okay. I loved that little moment though where we got all that information, because that's the beauty of a book written like this, right? Where it's like everything's already happened. We know that when this story is being written, everything's already happened. So like a lot of times the story is bringing us on as if it's real time. But then we have this element of like, oh, but actually I have, as the narrator, I actually am going to fill you in on how things happened after the fact so that you can have peace about these ponies that we're never going to circle back to. But if you wanted to know, here's how everything went down. After arriving at Rivendell, Tolkien did a re-edit of the tale so far. Oh. Bree now has both men and hobbits, and Trotter becomes a man, still called Trotter though. Was Trotter originally like a female innkeeper? Sam is introduced, and the name of the ring bearer becomes Frodo. Oh, yeah. I love getting these little like how the drafts changed. All right, any last call, and I'll read this troll poem, and we'll head out for the night. Like I said at the beginning, I'm leaning to keeping things on Monday. Trotter equals Strider. Trotter Strider? Trotter was the original name of Strider. Oh, okay. I thought Trotter, sorry, my bad. I was thinking of the other person that works at the inn, whose name I can now not remember. It's not even that important. Thank you for filling me in, y'all. Keeping me in the loop. Okay. I'll read this poem for us. Okay, yes, but I'll just put it up tonight. I'll just do a gut check on if we want to keep Monday nights, 5 p.m. as our book club time, or if we would rather look at switching to a Saturday or Sunday afternoon time. So I'll put that in the community section, and we can reassess the vote and see if weekend time would work better. But I know weekends in the fall are just as busy as in the summer, so we will see. I can give weekends, but it's just different for the masses. I understand. My final comment: I will die on the hill that Bob is a hobbit. Okay. I'll back you up. I don't want you to die. You don't need to die on the hill. You got this. I'm right there with you. If you believe it, I believe it. The text never tells us that it makes more sense for him to be a man, but I choose to believe he's a hobbit. I love that. Actually, you know what? Yeah, that's canon to me now. He does read like a hobbit. He really does. So I have absolutely zero questions. I agree. He's a hobbit. He's a hobbit. 100%. He's so written. He's so hobbit coded. He really is. Troll poem time. Troll sat alone on his seat of stone, and munched and mumbled a bare-old bone. For many a year he had gnawed it near, for meat was hard to come by, done by gum by. In a cave in the hills he dwelt alone, and the meat was hard to come by. Up came Tom with his big boots on. Said he to Troll, "Pray, what is you? For it looks like the shin o' my Uncle Tim, as should be a lion in the graveyard, caveyard, paveyard. This many a year has Tim be gone, and I thought he were lying in a graveyard." "My lad," said Troll, "this bone I stole, but what be bone that lies in a hole? Thine nuncle was dead as a lump o' lead, afore I found his shin bone. Tin bone, thin bone, he can spare a share for a poor old Troll, for he don't need his shin bone." Said Tom, "I don't see why thee likes o' thee, without axin leave should go makin' free, with the shank or the shin o' my father's kin. So hand the old bone over, Rover Trover. Though dead he be, it belongs to he, so hand the old bone over. For a couple o' pins," says Troll and grins, "I'll eat thee too, and gnaw thy shins. A bit o' fresh meat will go down sweet. I'll try my teeth on thee now. He now, see now. I'm tired o' gnawing old bones and skins. I've a mind to dine on thee now." But just as he thought his dinner was caught, he found his hands had hold of naught. Before he could mind, Tom slipped behind, and gave him the boot to warn him, darn him. A bump o' the boot on the seat Tom thought would be the way to larn him. But harder than stone in the flesh and bone of a Troll that sits in the hills alone. As well set your boot to the mountain's root, for the seat of a Troll don't feel it. Peel it, heel it. Old Troll laughed when he heard Tom's groan, and he knew his toes could feel it. Tom's leg is game since home he came, and his bootless foot is lasting lame. But Troll don't care, and he is still there with the bone he boned from its owner. Donor, boner. Troll's outseat is still the same, and the bone he boned from its owner. Nob is known to be a hobbit. Bob is too in my head. Must be. You couldn't at this point convince me otherwise. You could not. Okay, regardless of what day our next meeting is, and I'll schedule those out as soon as I get a couple days of votes in. The next, actually, is it? Okay, it is chapters 1 through 3 of book 2 in Fellowship of the Ring. So that's chapters, mini meetings the Council of Elrond, and these sections I think are a little bit longer. So give yourself a little more time if you're reading. Yeah, it's quite a bit longer actually. Yeah, so for me it's pages 271 through 365. So about 100 pages, where before we've been reading about, I want to say like 60. Chapter 2 is way long and dense. So I apologize in advance for the well done, Sam, indeed, on that poem. The length of it. But, you know, we're doing 3 sections for the second book, but for book 2 in Fellowship of the Ring. So, in that book, the next 2 parts of that won't be as long. Like, that's only 366 to 4 or 505. So this first section is a little bit longer, but I think we'll be okay. Just give yourself a little bit more time if you need it for a little over 100 pages versus 60. And I'll see you probably Monday, but we're just going to do a gut check on how people are feeling on days of the week that we're meeting. And if we need to make changes, we will. Otherwise, thank you for joining me. Chapter 2 is long and dense, yes, but full of good stuff. Okay. Thank you for that. I have no doubt. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in darkness bind them. See you next week. It's 1 a.m. in the UK. Michael, thank you for joining. Your favorite part of these 3 is in chapter 1, though. Okay. I can't wait. I always can't wait. Until our next meeting, read well, be well, and I'll see you there. Bye, guys. Thank you.